All right, Dr. Litvin, really, really great to see you. I was truly blessed to be in the OR during your clinical trials and seeing, the wonderful work you're doing. I know you'll be telling us a little bit about what you're doing and your startup, Corneat Vision. So my understanding of it is you use electrospinning technology to accelerate the match between human tissue and artificial devices so that they can be better integrated. And you have a whole suite of products that do this. I
Mhm.
saw, you know, real life your K-Pro, your cornea prosthetic, and that would allow, an artificial device in the eye not to be rejected. Lots of artificial implants would have, the body sees them as foreign and attacks them and generates an immune response, but to have a more smooth integration process. Maybe you can start by telling us about Corneat Vision and what you do.
So first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. It was a pleasure having you in the OR, and you're right. You saw the second generation of our artificial cornea being implanted by Professor David Rootman at the University of Toronto. Clinical trial is aimed at treating patients that are not suitable for regular transplantation. Transplantation is very accessible in Canada. There's a lot of tissue donation. So if a patient is suitable for the tissue, he can get it. And this is a very well developed surgical procedure, and we know a lot about it. So when we compare it to even to other organ donations, it's the most common of any organ donation. A patient that we operated on that wasn't a candidate, he already regained sight. So it's 1 month post-op, and his sight has been at least mostly restored. And that was our aim. When I founded Corneat Vision, it was both because I always wanted to try and tackle the challenge of corneal blindness. Many places around the world is not like Canada, and there's a very big shortage both of trained surgeons who know how to do this procedure and also tissue and tissue banks and infrastructure. So on the one hand, the patients like in Canada that don't have any other solution because of medical reasons. And on the other hand, a lot of places around the world, whether it's Africa, some parts of Asia, and various other not as developed countries, that there's a shortage both of surgeons, banks, and tissue. Yeah, I was actually I stumbled by chance on this chemical engineering technology, electrospinning, and was amazed to see that we can use an electrical field to create polymeric structure that imitates structures in our body to scale. This electrospinning technology can create fibers under a micron's thickness, which is very similar to what we see the collagen, the protein that makes up our own extracellular matrix. So that's how we started. We tried to develop an interface between a synthetic lens and our own body. Artificial corneas in the past were based on taking an artificial lens, but using some form of biological carrier in order to integrate them or interface them with the body. So, like there's a Boston K-Pro, which uses a corneal button in order to try to bridge the gap, and there's an osteoodontokeratoprosthesis, which uses a tooth in order to, and we wanted to take something completely synthetic, and that's where I started my journey. Throughout my residency, I was always interested in trying to overcome this, and when I stumbled on this technology, things connected,
Mm,
and I integrated the idea. I went and I drafted my first this patent,
mm.
and from there we founded the company and so forth.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. The purpose of this interview is to help, medical students and physicians who are interested in entrepreneurship explore what that will look like, especially when it comes to building hardware medical devices. Because lots of physicians and lots of business people, for them, it's easier to build a software solution, whether it's in diagnostics or using artificial intelligence. It requires less upfront costs, it's it requires less human resources. It requires less technical know-how. It requires less management, and it's not a long pathway to bring things to market. But what you're doing is very important because you're building something that has clinical application, something that can, restore sight to people who do not have any further hope of, of regaining their sight, for instance. So before we start, I just wanted to get a little more about your story. You talked about stumbling on electrospinning technology. What does that mean? How did you stumble on the technology?
Well, first of all, you said about entrepreneurship. It's not for everyone. You got to know that most times you fail. I mean, I did many, many different ventures throughout my life, trying to do things when I was a medical student and before, after, in various different fields. I mean, it's a matter of personality, and um, and you mostly fail. If you take a patent that was written and was submitted for a medical device, there are about 3 to 4 patents out of 1,000 that will become a medical device. And usually the journey is about 10 years. So
Mm,
you have to remember that maybe, I don't know, 2 to 3%, excuse me, 2 to 3 per thousand or 2 to 4 per thousand. It's less than, it's a 0.2% will succeed. So you got to be a little bit crazy too,
mm,
okay? Because our profession, being a physician, is
mm,
exactly the opposite. It's completely safe.
mm,
If you complete your medical school, you can fill up your work week with 3 weeks of work, with 4 weeks of work. There'll always be patients that need your assistance. So
mm,
it's the most secure, even if the financial situation in the world is terrible and there's whatever, always surgeons, doctors will always be needed.
mm,
So first of all, it's a personality issue and it requires a specific person.
mm,
So I understand why software is simpler. It is simpler.
mm,
Maybe there are more people who try, and therefore, you try for a year or two, you see that there are already 10 competitors. You don't have real good IP protection,
mm,
meaning patent protection. So you go to the journey and you might most probably fail after a year, but then you can go back to your old job or try something else. Medical devices is a long journey, and it's only for the people with a brave heart. It's not something that everyone tries. You are completely right. And even after you succeed, think about pharma. Let's say you come up with an idea for a nice, I don't know, biological solution for a specific cancer. You're a
mm,
basic scientist. Once you have that, the physician needs to just put the IV or give the pill. That's it.
mm,
But even if I succeed with this medical device, I have to train many surgeons to perform the surgical procedure. I have to implement the
mm,
technology, not only create it and think about it and then manufacture it and
mm.
go specific quality standards. There's a very, very long path. So I don't want to discourage everyone, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
It's a long path if you are adventurous.
Mm,
It's a roller coaster. It's great. I mean, it depends on the personality, but you gotta know what you're heading into.
mm, mm. That's true. Entrepreneurship, anytime, anyway, any day is difficult. I have started 2 companies, and first one failed when the pandemic started. The second one, I experience it every day. The stress of trying to bring something to market, not just building the stuff, but educating people enough so that they're interested in using the product. That's you know that's hard work. But you mentioned how you had this personality prior to this. In medical school, you tried to build solutions. Can you tell us a little bit about the solutions that you've tried in the past and that failed?
Well, many things I just didn't have the tools. In medical school, you learn how to be a surgeon, you learn how to be a physician, you learn how to take history
Mm,
or examine and things like that, but you don't have any tools to develop. I thought, for example, I went into the ER, the pediatric ER, and I saw that for babies, they put a little sticker with a bag to collect urine.
mm,
So I thought of a diaper that doesn't have absorptive power, but has the urine stick on the outside. And immediately after the baby pees, you can see outside the urine test. Various different, I had a notebook full of ideas. And I went to talk with various VCs. I was so naive and I was so immature that it was much more difficult to gain support from investors and so forth. So yeah, but
Mm.
that was my path. Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like from the beginning, you've always had hardware ideas, building devices as a solution.
Yes, and I can also say that I didn't invent the light bulb. I mean,
Yeah.
most inventions are improvements or the thought of combining different technologies in order to get a better solution or whatever. But yes, yeah, mostly hardware and some also business ideas, business innovation. But yeah.
Yeah. So back to the story of how you stumbled on electrospinning technology. Can you tell us how you first, got to know electrospinning technology and how you began to think about it as a potential solution for the problem you identified?
So, because I had these various ideas throughout the way, an investor that saw me in the past told me he's going to look at a specific technology that might have bearing on medicine, and he'd like me to come for his due diligence because he's thinking of investing in this electrospinning technology. And you have to understand, electrospinning was invented in the beginning of the 20th century. It's a very old technology, but it's been used for various different things like filters, industrial filters, because it's able to create such small fibers. They use and there was one company back where I come from Israel, that started to contemplate using it also in medicine, but they had no ideas. He thought there was potential. So he called me up and he told me, would you come with me to the due diligence to their presentation? So I came. And then after the presentation, I walked up to the CEO and I told him, listen, I have a few ideas for you in medicine. I mean, I was blown, you know, back from this technology and the potential implications in medicine applications. And he said, well, I don't want to hear anything. If you have anything real, go write your own patent and then you can come and speak to me. And it was the best advice that he gave me, because he could have stolen, he could have picked my brain, he could have even told me, I want to hire you in and give you small salary. I was so enthusiastic, I would have gone in. But the minute he made me make the investment
Mm.
and learn how to write a patent and learn what it means to have your own equity and develop and start to accumulate value
Mm.
in what you have.
Mm.
So I wrote a patent, and initially it was together with the university I worked in. So their tech transfer helped me. But eventually, after leaving the university, I started drafting additional patents and eventually was able to do a proof of concept, got a small investor to invest in a proof of concept. And once that was successful, other investors just wanted to invest, and I was able to start the path.
So talk about, how long did this process take from the first time you stumbled on the idea to actually developing the proof of concept, for instance?
So the first patent I wrote back when I was in the HMO was 2012, I think, or something like that. Even 2012, I think. But the cornea patent I wrote in 2015. So you can see that we're nearing 10 years,
Mm.
and hopefully by 2025, 2026, we'll already have the FDA approval. So from idea to an approved device, about 10 to 11 years. I took on a very big challenge, an artificial cornea at the interface between the external world and the internal world, with all the problems of the optical performance of the device, the integration, and the ability for healing, even though this device does not sit within our body.
Mm.
Let's say I would have made an artificial heart valve. It is not exposed to the external world. So once it's integrated in the heart, then it has no risk of infection or any other risk. But because it sits all the time at the interface between the external and internal compartments, there are a lot of challenges.
Mm.
So the timeline is about that.
Wow.
It took me about 10 years to get to this point and hopefully more or less to FDA approval. I hope this clinical trial, so far we have 3 patients, they're all doing great. So hopefully we'll continue recruiting and eventually attain the approval.
So 10 years to this point, not 10 years to approval.
We're 2025 soon, but I founded the company at the end of 2015, really the beginning of 2016.
Oh.
1st of January 2000. So I still have a year
Hmm.
for the 10 years. Now it's 9 years. So I won't reach that point in 10 years, but just a little. I said 10, 11 years. And I think it's only because I really took something that's a very big project. I think the standard hardware, like you call it, or a medical device,
Hmm.
could be approved within 7 to 10 years if everything, goes according to plan. But yeah, sometimes the plans mislead you, and you need to do another step.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That's a significant upfront investment. If you're thinking about it as an investor, people might think about it as a moat. It protects, your your work from other people because anybody who wants to compete with you, thinking about the 10-year timeline, that's already a challenge that prevents them from coming in. But also, how do you think about the potential for failure when you yourself are going to you know, take on a 10-year process? How does the potential for failure factor into your thinking?
So like I said in the beginning, it's a matter of personality, maybe life experience. I really believe in this project, so it's not that I'm gambling. I
Mm,
really believe that this product can work. I don't know if the current configuration is the best. Maybe we'll need more improvements. I want to get the approval so we can get traction, we can get revenues, we can
mm,
interest additional players, maybe big players. Let's say Alcom comes in just as a fantasy, not because I want to be filthy rich, but because let's say it's interesting for them to go into the corneal space. I believe that their funding can make this an even better device, right?
mm,
But I really believe so. Like I said, it's a matter of personality. I really believed in the product. I didn't think I was gambling. I think this also convinced my investors. And in my life experience, I really believe that life is short.
mm,
And I really believe that whatever you never regret things that you tried and failed, but
mm,
you do regret that lady that you didn't make a pass at.
mm.
Just because she was so pretty, you were shy. But
Yeah,
if you had approached her, maybe she'd like you, and maybe you'd be, married happily ever after today.
yeah,
And maybe not. Maybe you'd be
yeah,
rejected. But the minute you made that attempt, I at least feel that this way my life is more fulfilled, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah.
So
Business is not just about revenue. It's not just about the potential for success. It's also about doing something that you find personally valuable. That's what I'm hearing.
yeah, and I think also for my investors, I think one of the best approaches for a sales pitch
Mm,
is showing. I'm going to speak next week to investors.
mm,
I'm raising funds, and there is a big conference here in New York City. So I'm going to present to, I don't know, 150 to 200 investors, all of them VCs and family offices and people who are seasoned investors. And I'm opening my pitch by showing the first patient who we implanted in this clinical trial. His name is Patrick. He's 74. He has keratoconus, which is a genetic disease of the cornea. He's received in the past 6 transplantations, the last one in 2004. His youngest daughter was born in 2006. And now, for the past 4 months, when she's 18, was the first time he ever saw his daughter.
wow.
When I say that, the audience feels something. They feel connected. And I believe, like I told you about myself, that if I don't try because I'm afraid, I think that's much worse than trying and failing. And the same here, the minute I get people to understand the impact of this hardware, restoring sight, families with blind people, there are 2 additional family members who take care of this person. So this is something that restores normalcy,
Mm,
sometimes to the whole family.
mm,
And this is what drives me.
mm, mm. This is a wonderful story. I looked at, some of the patients that you've done your transplants on. I think I saw one in Israel, there's one in Canada, and there's one in, I'm not sure what the other country was.
Brand,
In France,
brand.
yes, yes, yes. And these patients are all doing great. They're having an opportunity that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
Hmm.
Yeah. So another question that comes to mind though is it's one thing to build a product. It's one thing to have an idea. It's another thing to build the product. But part of, building a business is, you know, leveraging networks because even to do the clinical trials you talk about, you need physicians who are willing to participate with you. You need to have some kind of connections with these physicians. You need, a network of investors who are willing to invest in you. And at the end of the day, when it's time to bring it to market, you need people to buy into your idea. And this all takes networks. So can you talk a little bit about how you've built and sustained these networks over time? How did you find the first physicians who were willing to try out your product, for instance?
Okay. In medicine, we need to publish, we need to, research. That's part of academic life. I did my residency under a professor who's a world-renowned anterior segment surgeon with hundreds of publications and fellows and residents that all were trained under his eyes. And after that, I went on to do a surgical retina fellowship, also again under two more surgeons that do a lot of academics. So, except for myself presenting at various conferences and later being approached and making, different relationship with different people all over the world, I also use my mentors, ask them to introduce. I want to know this guy. Can you make an introduction? You know, and eventually, with time, after people hear what you have to say and see the work you're doing. For example, the first corneal surgeon that I asked to join the advisory board of Corneat Vision. First of all, in a company like ours, any surgeon who joins the advisory board gets some stock options, becomes a partner in the journey. So this allows me to feel, that he and him to or her to feel that they are part of the company and not an advisor only, but actually a partner. And like I said, these surgeons, for example, some of them flew over to Israel to join the animal trials and to see for themselves the surgery and to give their remarks and to perform some of the procedures and see the results before they started to do it in humans. So that they were part of the journey as well. Eventually, they started talking to their colleagues and introducing me to their colleagues. So this is regarding the network, let's say, of physicians.
Mm,
Regarding investors, some in the beginning are what we call friends and family.
mm,
When you need less funds at the beginning and you need to just show that the concept works and the valuation is lower, so they get a bigger stake of a potential upside. So usually in the beginning, I think it's that, and then you need to approach, professional investors
mm,
that will also reflect on your company. If they're only non-professional or high net worth individuals, let's say it's less of a stamp of approval
mm,
on the company. But the minute you have a venture capital group or some other kind of investment arm, perhaps of Johnson and Johnson, Alcon, or whatever,
mm,
then you get sort of like an additional due diligence. And the third aspect is we were able to secure $7.5 million of non-dilutive funding from three different grants. So that's also a very, very selective process.
mm,
So after you pass, for example, we got one grant from the European Union of 2.5 million euros. There are thousands of companies trying to get it and only a few dozen that receive it. So
mm,
once you receive it, it's a multi-stage procedure. You are sort of like vetted when
mm,
other investors find you interesting. And we also got two grants from the Department of Defense in the US, one from the Army and one from the Navy, each one of them about $2.25 million. So altogether, these processes, they are usually vetted by other investors. For example, the Department of Defense asks VCs to hear my pitch, to read my materials, and then tell them what they think. An
Mm,
external evaluator, and all these different grants used external evaluators. So eventually your network grows this way. And
mm,
maybe the last thing is there are competitions also for startups in various different geographies. We participated in many different competitions like this, and once you take prizes, then again, so you're on the podium, and usually the judges come from other investment arms or tech transfers from different universities and people who are very professional in the field.
mm. Oh, yeah. So being a doctor, being an ophthalmologist gives you some kind of credibility when you talk about corneat vision and about, the miracle that corneat vision can do for patients and give them the miracle of sight. Are there any other advantages that come with being a physician, or is this something that a non-physician can take on as easily?
Well, first of all, about being a physician, we all need to be humble and remember we're not business people. I immediately, when founding the company, I co-founded it together with the person who's until today is still my partner and Corneat's CEO. And he has business experience. He's an engineer, an MBA, and has taken in the past a startup all the way from inception to an exit to was sold to an American corporation, then stayed on as a VP in that American corporation and acquired two additional companies for that multinational corporation. So he brought this experience with him, and I wouldn't have done this without him partnering with me. So, first of all, humility is very important. You got to know your strengths and you got to know your weaknesses. And don't try to boil the ocean by yourself.
Mm,
You won't succeed. So I think that that's one of the most important thing. Of course, there are geniuses everywhere, and there are entrepreneurs who are not physicians and still developed various different medical devices. Like, for example, the cardiac stent was developed by a PhD who had no medical experience, but he saw the potential of stenting coronary arteries, and he developed that specific configuration that gives it flexibility. And and so yes, to your question, yes, it's possible, but I think if you're not mad genius, then you should stick to your strengths and partner with people who can amplify your strength by bringing their strengths into that partnership.
mm. Okay, thanks. That's a great answer. The reason I asked the question is because, as physicians, you want to do something that you're more likely to succeed in. And I appreciate your perspective about, bringing in a person who actually knows business. If you do not feel competent alone to navigate, the building of a medical device company. The other question I wanted to ask you was about, we've talked about how you've done your clinical trials in multiple countries and how you're heading for FDA approval. Could you talk a little bit about bringing this to market and what regulatory compliance looks like? Because you're involved with the European Union, which has EC, I believe, and then the FDA. And I know that you're doing a trial in Kenya, if I recollect correctly. So how do all these things, how do you navigate the regulatory environment of multiple countries?
So first of all, when we founded the company, we did a few things in-house that really are the character of Corneat Vision. The person who assisted me in building the clinical department and the regulatory department, Mr. Jerry Tal, who has since left the company, but he was able, together with me, to secure an ISO certification for the development of medical devices in-house. So we started by owning our own quality assurance,
Mm,
making sure that the devices that we manufacture, even if it's subcontracted, fall under the medical device regulatory workflow. Okay? So this is how we started. And eventually we brought in an additional person who is also a BA in biology and an MBA, but he is very versed in trials, in drafting protocols, in building the regulatory framework that's needed in order to comply with various different regulatory bodies. You're right that Kenya is very different than China, which is very different than places in Europe. And in a couple of weeks, I'm flying to India to do 4 different implantations there in 2 sites. And you've got to learn the specific regulatory landscape and understand if you can comply. For example, in India, they do not support any more first-in-human clinical trials because in the past, many companies tried to use the Indian infrastructure sort of like for a sandbox. And every new device, they started, trying it on Indian people and eventually trying it later in other parts. So in India, for example, you cannot do first in human. So the first in human we did, where you said previously, a person in Israel, for example, is already 4 years with our device. We submitted that to the Indian regulatory body, and I presented, and eventually we were able to secure the regulatory compliance. And an additional maybe thing that you have to remember is if you work in Canada, we can manage the trial in-house. We speak the language. The coordinator at Toronto Western is very well educated, can support, and the relationship works very well. But in India, we took an external partner, a CRO, a clinical research organization, which manages the arm in India for us. Of course, the subcontractors. So you have to you have to adapt and construct the clinical trial according to the geography where you are planning to perform it. And regarding Europe and the United States, usually the FDA doesn't state it, but usually it is looking to see that you used also American sites.
Mm.
So for now, for example, we still don't have American sites approved because they asked to see some data from outside of the United States. Similar to India, let's say, they don't like to do first in human in the United States. So hopefully we will need to do that. So you have to learn, you have to read, RTFM, you know that abbreviation. It's read the fucking manual. Every one of these regulatory body has a manual, and you got to go sit down and read the small print and understand what they're looking for and comply with their standards and the specific documents they're looking for. And eventually, if you tick all the check boxes, you'll get the approval.
Wonderful. It seems like the answer that we keep returning to is leveraging people with expertise. Whatever the problem that a business person faces, they don't have all the expertise. They have to be able to, in some way, leverage someone else who has the expertise.
I think generally, when you have a company and you have a team of individuals, even if you're the founder and even if you're a physician, it's very, very important when working with a team to remain humble, ask for advice, ask people. For example, I told you that I'm presenting in a couple of weeks.
Uh,
So I asked for some of my teammates to hear my presentation and give me feedback. And by now they know that when I ask for feedback, I mean it.
mm,
And they were very, direct with me. And I think when I go to present
mm,
in real life, I will be much better prepared this way.
mm,
So yes, when you build a team, the CEO needs to know that he doesn't know everything, and the medical, chief medical officer also doesn't know everything. And like I said, you can't boil the ocean by yourself.
yeah.
You got to do it's a team effort.
Thank you. The next question I have for you, I know you've talked about the long process to arrive at where you are. But my understanding is that many patent protections last about 20 years. So what does the future look like when these patent protections are gone? What's the pathway to profitability and revenue generation after that?
Intellectual property is a strategy. It's a business strategy. You write your first patent. We already have 10 patents. 5 of them are granted, and an additional 5 in different stages of development and examination. So a patent starts as a provisional patent. Then you go for a PCT. The provisional is an additional year. If within that year you want to discard it and not publish it, then it will not be held against you. But once it's published, even if it's withdrawn, you cannot reuse it. And you have to remember that it's similar to paying taxes on property that you have. If you own it and you hold it and you don't build on it anything, you still need to pay every year the taxes, right?
Mm,
So a patent is like having a plot of land, and you need to pay taxes every year. So many people, they sometimes after a while they leave their patent and they stop paying the taxes, and that's it. I mean, it was published and it's not doesn't exist anymore as a protection. On the other hand, once you write the first patent, you don't really know where you're going. You're
mm,
just plotting a map. You're saying, this is my idea, this is my estimate, this is this. And then the provisional patent goes, after a year, you decide you are going to move forward. From that point, you have an additional 20 years.
mm,
Now, in that 20 years, you do a lot of research. And in that research, you change and tweak the design of your device and change different configuration. And you thought you use this polymer, and now you use this polymer, and you fine tune the patent, and you can submit additional applications. So
mm,
let's say after 3 years, you develop, I don't know what, something that for the cornea, I don't know, is different specification of the suturing holes and this hole, the different things that you didn't think of initially. And
mm,
then you submit an additional provisional saying, I'm doing this, what I said before, but now I'm doing it together with suturing holes and together with it, and you get an additional patent. So
mm,
you prolong your protection,
mm,
not unjustly, justly, because you're still in the development process.
mm,
Once it's in the market, it's harder to prolong the protection because you already have a device. But let's say you take this device and you want to do a new model. Let's say, for example, now I want to put in my K-Pro night vision. Let's say this technology advanced, and I want to integrate within the optics night vision. And the patient will have a cornea that he can see also at night when it's dark, like a soldier going into battle with night vision goggles, right?
right.
So I write a new patent, a night vision K Pro. So I get additional protection for that model, and
Mm,
so forth. So IP, it's a strategy. It doesn't end from one end, from one point to the other. It's not just one patent. You start here and you have 21 years to run, and you should run fast because you need that residual time where you have protection and
mm,
you already have the device. It usually is not like that.
mm. That's great to know. I didn't know that, and I'm sure a lot of people don't know that. They think it's like a more rigid system. And then when they hear that it takes about ten years to get something approved, it's already scares them because then they have only 10 years to, to hit profitability and get to market dominance. Yeah.
But even after 10 years of, let's say I have this K Pro,
Mm,
and let's say I don't have any additional protection, and let's say I have only 10 years in the market.
mm,
After I complete this 10 years, I'm going to be the Alcon of K Pro. I mean, whoever comes after me will need already to prove that his brand is better than mine and not just a mock-off.
mm,
I might need to reduce my price. I might need to do various different business strategies, but doesn't mean that, there is a cliff at the
mm,
end of the patent protection. It's really not that way. You see with all the glaucoma drainage devices in ophthalmology, which are already, legacy devices that were developed in the 80s and the 90s, and still everybody implants Ahmed Valve and Bear Valves, and
yeah.
these are old devices with no patent protection. But
Mm,
nobody tries to compete with them because they are already have so much traction that it's very difficult to, it's just I want to open Amazon right now. I
mm.
mean, so what? The Amazon has so many trucks and warehouses and this and that. I'm so much behind that it would be difficult even if, everybody would open the door and tell me, "Look, go ahead and try,
Right, right, right. That's useful information. Can you talk a little bit about maintaining a practice as a physician, as an ophthalmologist, while building a company? Because as when you build a startup and you go to all these pitch competitions, one of the questions they often ask you is, are you full-time on your startup? And it's almost like a requirement sometimes for people, for investors to think that you're really serious about what you're doing to be full-time. But many physicians might not be willing to give up their practice. I know that for a while you maintained your practice, continue to see patients while building your startup. Can you talk about what that looked like, what the reception was like with investors, and the transition to going full time on your startup?
First of all, like I said, I started the company with a partner who is the CEO until today.
Mm,
So I am not the leader of the company. I
mm,
am the medical leader of the company, but it served a purpose also for the investors in the company that I maintain my practice both surgically and clinically. And this is because I think the communication with other surgeons and other physicians as a colleague, a fellow surgeon, is much better
mm,
than just, having completely abandoned medicine
mm,
and trying to speak with some very, very famous professor, whatever, you know.
mm,
Now it's more, eyes at an eyes height.
mm,
We're both physicians, we're both surgeons, so it served that purpose. We were colleagues, so I could more easily recruit people to collaborate with us. And when investors asked me, I told them, listen, even though I'm half or whatever. With time, I was, let's say, 75% and 25% in the clinic.
mm,
I told him, I'm 120% for this company. It's my baby.
mm,
It's my brainchild. Of course, I want it to succeed. But in order for it to succeed, I still need to keep and maintain my professional acuity, and I still need to be a physician. And it's for everybody's interests that I maintain my professionalism. And for that, I brought on a partner who will manage. But one thing you are right, there are physician entrepreneurs who appoint themselves as the CEO, and perhaps they're good at it. I
mm,
don't think it's my constitution, but if they're good at it, I think they need to leave medicine because
mm,
I think you can't be a CEO in a doctor
mm,
because I don't know how other physicians, but I'm sure it's ubiquitous. I am very much, you know, my patients have give me their confidence.
mm,
And after I do a procedure, I must be accessible and devoted to my patients. And as someone who is devoted to my patients, I can't be the 120% CEO position, right? Or 150% CEO position. In
mm,
order to be a CEO, you need to be the father and the mother of the company. You have employees, you have investors, you have board members, you have various partners, external, like a subcontractor. You have to be on top of everything all the time. And you cannot be devoted to patients who you operated on last night and might have now elevated intraocular pressure. And at 1 o'clock in the evening, they're in pain. 1 o'clock in the night, they call you up and you tell me you go to the ER because your viscoelastic, created a lot of pressure in your eye and you must get treatment now. And I can't treat you right now at 1 o'clock in the morning. So go to the ER. I'll give a call to the, attending physician there and make sure that he knows to expect you and whatever.
mm,
But this is something you have to do as a physician. So to answer your question, if you develop a software application that will manage better, I don't know what, the delivery rooms for babies, and you did a residency in obstetrics, and you are sure that you know how to bring this to market. You can't continue and work and be devoted to women who are giving birth to babies and with all the risk and stuff, and still develop and maintain a company. It's extremely irresponsible.
mm.
That's the way I perceive it.
No, wow. Yeah. That's it's definitely a challenge for a lot of people. And, it's a struggle, even being a student and running a company. it's a struggle because the company requires more than 100% of your attention, and being a student requires more than 100% of your attention at the same time. So it's definitely a struggle no matter what you do. Yeah. Before we begin to wrap up, I wanted you to talk a little bit on the wide potential for this technology. We've talked a lot about cornea prosthetic, but you have other products. You have the e-shunt, for glaucoma. You have the Ever patch, to conceal,
Yes,
devices implanted. And then you even have the G patch for periodontal soft tissue reconstruction. So can you talk about the wide array of applications for this technology that go even beyond ophthalmology?
sure. First of all, tissue is used in a lot of surgeries in order to fortify other tissue, for example, in areas that you have missing tissue. You see skin grafts, you see ECMs, very different, processed tissue that are sold for various uses, dental, bone, soft tissue, and so forth. But the only one that's non-degradable and completely polymeric is what we've developed. Because
Oh,
all the rest are organic or, either are from animals,
oh,
humans or other animals, or manufactured, but still collagen or any other protein or construct that eventually degrades. There are various different aspects of medicine. For example, connecting something synthetic to the body like the K-Pro, or fortifying a tissue like the Everpatch and the G-Patch. We have also been able to prove that with various animal models that it creates osteo induction and also growth of new bone, both into it and underneath it. When you do a bone defect study and you put the patch over it, you see the bone healing underneath and into the matrix. Has a lot of different applications.
oh,
Yeah. We have drafted a patent for concealing sensors in the body because most sensors, let's say glucose sensors, eventually encapsulate.
oh,
So this material does not encapsulate. So giving the sensor access to the extra, the interstitial fluid
oh,
for a much longer duration of time. So all these different, guided bone regeneration, guided tissue regeneration, concealment of various sensors and implants, fortifying tissue, and connecting artificial devices to the body. And generally, if you look at it, there are always these science fiction movies of cyborgs, right? And I believe that this is one of the missing links that
oh,
can allow humanity slowly to go towards an area where you can connect the synthetic with the biologic
oh,
for the benefit of medical benefit of humans
oh.
and make this connection possible. I think until now, uh, there was not a synthetic material that was able to bridge this gap.
Right, right.
And so I think this is the place of the material that we've developed.
Oh,
And I'm sure that we will learn of the additional use cases with time. And that's our goal. Our goal is to create a business, like you said, that can continue and create value both for the investors, but also for the patients and the surgeons, improving surgical procedures, making them safer, shorter, improving safety for the patients, and also bringing revenues and eventually, providing value for investors to continue investing in this.
oh. I really like that you brought up cyborgs because I think that what you're building is really the stuff of science fiction. And when we think about the frontiers of our fascination with, bionic integration, with synthetic augmentations for human beings, or even, we talk about integrating computers with human beings. It looks like when I read about what you're doing, it looks like this can form, the extracellular matrix that would allow the growth of not just collagen and capillaries, but maybe you can talk about the potential for more complex tissue growth beyond collagen and capillaries, but nerve, muscle, and more things like that.
Well, we have various different collaborations that I currently cannot yet speak about, but I can tell you that we were approached by various American institutions that work in this space. And until we have the security of our IP and until we have these partnerships in place,
Mm,
I will not talk to specifically to them,
mm,
but uh, you are right. You are right. There is potential.
mm.
And I believe, like I said, when I went on this path, some of these companies can go under because of a recession. They have a great device, right? But
Right.
economic recession comes in and investors are hesitant and the company falters.
Mm,
Some of them can, fail because of a bad management. Like a doctor that thought he can do everything and he didn't know how to partner with someone who can teach him some stuff or whatever, various different challenges that can meet a company and bring it under, even though the device is great.
mm,
Right now, I believe we have an unbelievable technology with a lot of potential. I see people and different institutions who are, paying attention,
mm.
and we are starting different collaborations. And hopefully, next time when you and I meet and
Mm.
speak again, I'll have some new stuff to tell you.
Wonderful. Even when you talk about night vision, for instance, night vision is already an example of that kind of science fiction augmentation of human capability.
Yes, and even if you look at, for example, Air Force pilots
Mm,
having their head-up display, on their helmet, think
mm,
about something like that integrated within some optical thing within our eye, whether it's an IOL or a K-Pro or whatever, right?
mm,
So right now we're dreaming
mm,
and everything seems supernatural, but I can tell you that my grandfather, who passed away about 10 years ago and he was 101, when he went to first grade, he was taken about 5 miles to the school with a horse.
mm,
And when I showed him my children, his great grandchildren, I showed it to him on an iPhone. So think about the transformation he had to go from, going to school on a horse.
mm,
Second grade was the flu pandemic of 1917. That's one of his memories. And eventually he saw people landing on the moon. He saw iPhones.
mm,
So I believe, even though we're dreaming now, maybe in 20 or 30 years, these integrated devices and the integration between computing and
mm.
robotics and human beings, I'm not sure it's such science fiction, and I'm pretty confident at least some of it we'll see in our lifetime. You for sure, and I hope myself as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. But more immediately, though, do you ever see or do you see this as replacing the need for organ donations or tissue donations in the future? I know you talked about how right now in some countries like Canada, they already have a good donation system. And this is not the same everywhere in the world, but even donations and organ donations, tissue donations are unreliable. You cannot predict what the future will be like for them. And if you could mass produce something like this, do you think it could be as good as and even a replacement for tissue and organ donation in the near future?
Well, we can only dream, right? I mean, pancreas secretes the islets of Langerhans, secrete insulin.
Hmm,
And when you have diabetes, juvenile diabetes, then you lose that ability. And for example, this seems like something which is pretty straightforward, taking some form of construct that knows how to sense how much glucose there is and react as fast as our own pancreas with secreting insulin into the bloodstream. I'm not sure that it's so far away. Maybe not creating a completely synthetic liver yet. Maybe that will take a few decades. But yes, we have dialysis right now. Think about it. It's
hmm,
a kidney and it sits outside the body.
hmm.
But once when they developed the first cellular phone, it was like this, right?
Yeah.
You needed to take a little suitcase in order to use the phone not at your home. But today it comes like this small little device. You can put an earphone and that's it. You don't need anything else. So maybe the dialysis machine will be able to go inside the body and
Mm,
not outside. And it won't even be an organ. It will be completely technological. I mean, I don't know. There are
mm,
various different avenues that can develop with time, whether it's 3D printing of organs
mm.
or completely technological solutions that replace the need for organs that are now functioning.
Or electrospinning polymer that allows the regeneration of already existing tissue so that it can do more than it can do currently.
Yeah, that also, we have a lot of research ahead of us, and I'm sure, I don't believe that I'm going to change the world, but I think that humanity has the possibility to
Mm,
do many, many different things, some of them very bad, but some of them also very good. I
right.
try to stay on the side of the good, bring some benefit for mankind. So yes.
Thank you. Thank you for having this wonderful conversation. I like the themes of humility that you brought. You thinking about what you're doing from a humble perspective. I think you're doing an amazing job, but also humility in the sense of listening to other people, recruiting the right expertise and leveraging people to build solutions. I wonder if you have any closing thoughts or any advice for, young people, medical students, physicians who are looking to go on the adventurous path of entrepreneurship like you have.
Um, I think for younger people, dream big. You you can do it. I mean, anything you put your mind to. But once you have an idea, focus on that idea, and don't have ADHD. Don't try to do many different things at once. If you want to do something, the better way is to do it as as good as you can. And in order to do so, you have to focus. So, like I said in the beginning, I told you I had many different ideas throughout medical school, my residency, and so forth. But eventually, I found one that I thought has real potential, has real meaning, has significance for the patient population.
Mm,
Uh, if it succeeds, will give me a feeling of meaning to my life. And I think we all search for meaning for our life as well. And yeah, believe in yourself. You can do it. There's nothing wrong with also not succeeding, but there's a lot of regret when you don't try.
mm, mm. Thank you so much, Dr. Litvin. Really happy to have you. Your words have been really inspiring and really helpful for thinking about, the journey to building hardware medical device company. And I think that's a really unique perspective that you bring.
I would like to thank you for a lovely interview. I had a great time. And thank you for having me on your show. I wish you all the best and great success and luck. And if you need my assistance throughout your path, please feel free to approach me, and I'll be happy if I can to
Yeah,
help you in any way.
yeah. Thank you.